How will Dilma Rousseff and José Serra deal with these domestic drivers of Brazil's foreign policy? Well, there's one certainty that I'll mention, that either one will start off their administration with much lower popularity levels and less charisma than Lula's. And that might have an impact on Brazil's foreign policy through several ways. First, Dilma. Dilma will certainly try to follow Lula's footsteps on general foreign policy goals, and she's likely to have a broad or broader coalition to deal with, as Garman mentioned. He mentioned that the left is growing. It is, but PT is not. PT is the 2002-06 election cycle. PT actually had less deputies elected. So that means that she'll have to deal with a broad or even broader coalition than Lula had to deal. That means that with less charisma and leadership, she'll probably maintain a large cabinet to satisfy her political allies, meaning that a multitude of voices of foreign policy, however, could bring turbulence to Dilma's administration's decision-making process. She seems to lack Lula's experience in dealing with different opinions. That has been said by many former colleagues of her, that maybe she doesn't have a lot of experience dealing with different opinions. She may also be more prone to criticism inside and outside Brazil. Finally, she might experience more pressure from her own party, as Lula did, but was able to fend off this PT's pressure with his, again, charisma, popularity, and Teflon skin. These are all ingredients for a riskier and possibly frustrated foreign policy. It will be hard to maintain Lula's international legacy. And Dilma may benefit from a possible future international role for Lula. There's been said that he could become World Bank president or UN Secretary General, etc. Serra is likely to have a smaller cabinet, smaller coalition, and less divergent voices on many issues, including foreign policy. He will be forced from the beginning to send a clear message on issues such as trade relations with countries like Iran, Venezuela, and other authoritarian regimes. So far, his party, PSDB, hasn't done much but criticize. A few names apparently identified with Serra's campaign team suggest a foreign policy closer to that of Cardoso's government, more mainstream. But that's also unlikely to happen because Brazil's regional and global importance rose significantly, mainly due to its economic performance. Brazil's role in international institutions, the WTO, the G20, BRICS, and so on, cannot simply be undone. No retreat is possible without considerable costs. Serra's challenge will be to find a more sober and less ideological foreign policy without seeming to be less ambitious. On the specific issues, and I just list 4 specific issues, on regional integration, just to finish, on regional integration, the main question is about the future of Mercosur as a customs union. There have been talks on Serra's camp on a possible step back, turning Mercosur into a free trade area and freeing its members to seek bilateral trade agreements with other countries. But since there's no clear free trade agenda on either candidate's platforms, it's unlikely that fundamental changes with Mercosur will happen. With Dilma, more of the same, but with Serra, more pressure on Argentina to try to solve trade disputes. On the political front, Serra is expected to adopt more neutral stance between left and right divide in the continent, less vocal than Lula, and a more business-oriented approach. Again, maintain the core of Lula's agenda without the ideological rhetoric. I'm not saying that Lula is not business-oriented, but basically with much of the same but less ideological rhetoric. And both candidates, I believe, will likely favor state enterprises, Petrobras, Eletrobras, BNDES, as tools of Brazilian foreign policy in the region. Trade. Despite PSDB's criticisms of Lula's foreign trade policy, the party lacks a clear alternative message on trade negotiations, as I said before. Bilateral negotiations with the US, the EU, Doha Round, deals with other emerging countries. PSDB, as I mentioned, is not a free trade party. One matter that will have to be addressed is the increasing competition with China in other markets, mainly in the United States and also in Latin America. For example, Brazil has large trade surpluses with every South American neighbor. A situation that may have to change in the near future if Brazil wants to deepen regional integration and gain more access to markets and also increase Brazilian foreign direct investment in these countries. We have surpluses with every South American neighbor since the 1990s, with a few. With Argentina was the only one exception in the 90s. Also, in Serra's camp, there's talk of a possible Brazilian USTR, something of a CAMEX with teeth, to try to distance trade and politics and ideology. I don't believe that will happen because CAMEX had an important role now, recently with the retaliations against the United States on cotton subsidies. So, but still, that talk is being kept on in the media. Coalition with the emerging powers. That's a safer bet, I believe. Groupings such as BRICS, BASIC, and IBSA. For those who don't know, BASIC is the Brazil, South Africa, India, and China on climate change. BRICS, you all know. IBSA is India, Brazil, South Africa. These groups will likely remain in Brazil's foreign policy agenda, whoever wins the elections. Through these groups, Brazil will address major global issues, I believe, like reform of multilateral institutions and climate change, among other things. There are limitations, however. No clear common denominator on many issues on these groups, and that will keep alive the search for a tentative agenda, and that will, I believe, that will be tantalizing. So basically, never find one issue that will bring together all these different emerging powers. And finally, Brazil-U.S. relations, a history of permanent frustration and unmet expectations. What does Brazil want? Does Brazil want a trade agreement? No, not really. Just lower tariffs and lower subsidies, as we've seen. Arms purchase? Not really. But it's important to note that of the major emerging powers, and I'm mentioning here India, China, Russia, and even Japan and Germany, Brazil is the only that has no major treaty, defense, security, trade, or special bilateral relationship with the United States. India has a recent nuclear treaty with the United States. China and the G2 talks with the United States on finance, climate change. Russia has its defense and security dialogue with the United States on issues such as NATO expansion, missile defense, disarmament. Japan and Germany are traditional allies of the United States. Brazil has no clear major treaty with the United States. There's been talk of a defense treaty recently between Brazil and the United States, but nothing clear yet. Biofuels and energy cooperation could become the core issues of a bilateral agenda. Yes, they could, but there are a lot of differences between Brazil production of ethanol and the United States, etc. And finally, what does Brazil want from the United States? So far that I can observe is Brazil wants the United States recognition of Brazil's role as a major power and major partner, not only on regional issues, but also on global affairs as well. Basically, that's it. I have other few issues here, but I think my time is up.
João.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now hear from